On today's Locked On Senators, we are live in St. Paul on a Sens game day. Ottawa looking to extend its win streak against the Minnesota Wild.
And along this win streak, there's been a lot of players that are heating up, including the captain, Brady Tkachuk.
Last time the Sens won 6 in a row was 2017. We're going to look back at what that roster looked like and looking at the 2020 draft. We knew it was good, but just how many are playing in tonight's game? We'll get into all that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Senators podcast. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I'm Jake Sanderson, and you're listening to Locked On Senators podcast.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
Welcome inside episode 1015 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Ross Levitan alongside Brandon Piller here in St. Paul, Minnesota, across the street from the XL Energy Center, where we will be boots on the ground tonight. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. A reminder, you can follow the show on social media. We're at Sens Central on Twitter, LockedOn.Senators on Instagram. The show is free and available on all podcast platforms, including on YouTube, where you should hit the notification bell because tonight in the postcast, Seth Tupal from Locked On Wild will be here. Excited to have a fun conversation, hopefully after a 6th straight Senators win. Today is Tuesday, April 2nd, and Pilsy, why is it snowing in Minnesota?
It's cold in Minnesota. Isn't that the Lil Yachty song? Cold like Minnesota. So we thought Winnipeg was cold. No, it's colder in Minnesota. But Ross, we're hoping the Ottawa Senators can stay hot in Minnesota because a 6-game win streak would be so nice. And to extend our streak, boots on the ground together to 14-0-1. Well, that would be something special.
Wouldn't it be? It's the first time we're going to a game in the States together, but Don't worry, we've got our security detail. Seth Tupal will be with us throughout tonight's game. It's going to be a ton of fun. Really excited to see this team in action. Jacques Martin just confirming it's going to be the same lineup as we saw in Winnipeg. Thomas Chabot is here, not ready to return just yet, so Tyler Kleven will stay in the lineup. He is one of 7 2020 NHL draft picks to be in this game. We'll get to the full list and talk about that in the third segment of today's show. Should we look back before we look forward? Because I turned in on Hockey Reference. I was like, okay, the last time the Senators won 6 games in a row was March 2nd to March 12th of 2017.
Let's start with that.
Of course.
They only get on hot streaks in March.
At least they were already playoff bound. So much so that they added Alex Burrows just before that streak.
Hugs and high fives.
6 points in 6 games for Alex Burrows during the Sens' last 6-game win streak.
I wonder what they think of the trade now.
Not only Alex Burrows playing well, but how about I tell you that Chris Kelly played all 6 of those games?
Shout out Chris Kelly. I mean, the guy's a winner.
Chris DiDomenico played 2 of those games. Like we are going back into the history books. I mean, you look at it and kind of Erik Karlsson and Mike Hoffman both with 7 points in 6 games. Like Cody Ceci was there, obviously Dion Phaneuf, Derek Brassard, Tommy Wingles was a member of that team. So we are going way back, and hopefully this can be another one. This is before Brady Tkachuk's career started.
Yes. Like he said, this is the best winning streak of his career.
They did win 5 games last year, right when they got Chychrun. They gave us that little bit of hope, and that's what kills you, I've heard.
Yes.
Hope. But now they can make it 6. I'm confident they do it, too, because we're going to be here, and that gives me a level of confidence.
Of course.
Joonas Korpisalo, you got good goaltending, you get confidence from that. He's been playing his best hockey as an Ottawa Senator. So
he has been.
Lots of things I like about the Ottawa Senators in tonight's game.
And Ross, looking across on the other end of the rink, the Minnesota Wild, this isn't exactly an ideal situation for them as they're coming off John Hines' gamble of pulling the goalie in overtime, failing. So they're probably a little rattled after that. And then a Ryan Hartman 3-game suspension for throwing a stick at a ref.
For javelin.
Yeah, for javelin. So, and
if you haven't seen the clip of that, go check it out. It's on Twitter. You can go to NHL Player Safety and look at it. It was wild. Pardon the pun. No pun intended.
Wild. Although I don't know. Like, was it really that dangerous of a play? I don't think so. But I think it's just setting an example. Hey, maybe you shouldn't throw things at refs. And so that's kind of fair.
And for a guy that's already been suspended a couple times, he was fined earlier this year for high sticking Cole Perfetti right off of a face-off in a premeditated move. He's a bit of a greasy player.
Definitely a greasy player, but he's an important.
I'd love to have him on Ottawa.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of, well, Foligno's not really a greasy guy, but you take Foligno and Hartman out of this lineup, and that puts a big kind of hole in their physical grinding game on that bottom six. The Wild have struggled to score depth scoring this year. So those guys adding that physical edge and not being in the lineup, I think that's going to give the Ottawa Senators an advantage. And then Jared Spurgeon also not being on the back end. That's a huge loss for the Minnesota Wild.
Yes, it is. And the Minnesota Wild are 8 points out of the playoffs, but they do have 1 game in hand. And LA, who's holding that final playoff spot, losers of 3 in a row. So that's kind of the fake hope. They're in the Senators' position from last year.
Yeah.
Where it's like they're a little bit too far out, but the team ahead of them is losing. So you're like, maybe?
Yeah.
Maybe? This could be the final nail in their coffin, though, tonight.
It could be. And look, if you're the Ottawa Senators, obviously you want to keep your win streak going. You want to play spoiler. So there's actually some motivation here for the Sens to put a good game on the road here. And hopefully, Ross, talking about streaks continuing, get their second road win west of the Eastern Conference or Eastern time zone. So that'd be nice as well.
Wouldn't it? And LA and Minnesota do play one more time.
And the last time they played, LA beat them 6-0.
Oh, right. And that was recently, too. So
yeah.
Really, that's probably what ended their season.
Well, the season's not over if you ask Wild fans.
Yeah, well,
if you ask John Hines.
We'll ask them tonight. The Minnesota Wild. I'm excited to be in this building. This is like,
sick.
It looks sweet.
Yeah.
I wish I could just peel the curtain back. We're on the other side of the hotel, but we are staying right across the street from the rink. But we're going to do a pregame meetup. We went last night to this bar. It was unbelievable. So we're going back there. Tom Reed's Pub. It's at 258 7th Street West. So we heard it's the place to be pregame. We're going to be there, boots on the ground. Look for the Timmy and Brady jerseys. We're not messing around here on this trip. And come say hi before the game. We're already looking forward to having conversations with other Sens fans who travel. # Sens Abroad, but the fan perspective. So really looking forward to that. So we'll see you at Tom Reed's before the game. I want to give a quick shout out to Dean Brown for coming to meet us last night. Had a few cold ones with him, had some nachos, some wings, and just great conversation. And the Sens are lucky to have guys like that who have been around the organization since day one. I mean, just wind them up and let them go. It was a great conversation. So shout out to Dean Brown. And it was a little weird seeing Dean without Gord, though. I thought they slept in bunk beds. I thought they went everywhere together. Like, it was just strange.
Yeah, we asked Dean, where's Gordon? And he's like, probably doing work. So Dean was having a good chat with us. And yeah, the amount of things that he knows, not just Ottawa Senators, but league-wide from being around the game for so long, it was a real treat to get to chat with him for a while. So shout out, Dean.
Really was. If you're listening to the game on radio tonight, you'll hear Dean Brown for what, the 2000th time in Senators history. Really is remarkable, the career that he's had. So shout out to him. Shout out to the Ottawa Senators and all the fans. We saw so many of them in Winnipeg and hoping to see more. Obviously, it's a little bit less when you're not in Canada anymore. But we're here, and we're hoping to see everybody else. Full game day preview is coming up next in terms of our Locked On Lookout players. No spoilers, but Brady Tkachuk is on an absolute heater. We'll get into that, 2020 draft talk, and more on the other side. You're listening to Locked On Senators. It's your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Guys, March Well, now we're into April.
We call this Caitlin Clark's month.
Yeah, no kidding.
Angel Reese, Paige Buchert.
Yep, lots of great sports happening right now. March Madness, men and women. The hockey season is getting real close to the playoffs here. NBA, MLB is back. So there's so much sports to get in on. And if you want to get in on sports, you got to do it at FanDuel, North America's #1 sports book. Why would you go anywhere else? And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any $5 bet that wins. Let me say it again, $200 if your bet wins. And you can bet on the tournament, NHL, MLB, NBA, whatever you like. So visit fanduel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. Ross and I will get a couple bets in the mix for this Sens game, as the Sens been on a heater, and you can do the same and do it on North America's #1 sportsbook. It's FanDuel.
Here we are. It's a game day, 8 o'clock Eastern start time, so it's not an hour early like the Saturday game in Winnipeg, where it was 6 o'clock Central, 7 o'clock Eastern. So
Is that going to screw with the Sens? That might have been a big reason why they were able to win outside the Eastern time zone.
That's a great question, Pilsy. Hey, let the record show that we believe that the Sens aren't going to need to rely on something so finicky as that.
Do we? We're pretty superstitious.
I am a little upset that the Minnesota Wild just announced that Marc-Andre Fleury will be in goal against Ottawa. Are they hiding Philip Gustafsson from us?
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, both those goalies, not exactly the years that the Wild would have liked, but Fleury, although he's played less games, does have the better numbers this year. So we'll see how that goes for the Ottawa Senators. But who cares who the Wild's goalie is, Ross? The Ottawa Senators have Joonas Korpisalo starting for them.
They certainly do, which means it's the exact opposite of what we saw the first time these two teams played. When Ottawa came back, they were trailing after two periods. In Sweden, it was the two Swedes in goal, Anton Forsberg and Philip Gustafsson, and Ottawa ends up winning in a shootout. Was it not?
It was a shootout, and Ross, not only did Forsberg have a great game, he also had an assist on Eric Brandstrom's beautiful slap shot goal. So that was a big night for the Swedes.
Unreal. And tonight, Ottawa will face Marc-Andre Fleury for the 38th time in his storied career. I mean, it's not the most Fleury's played against any other team. You just look one team down. He's played Philadelphia 61 times.
I mean, makes sense being in Pitt a long time.
This guy is an absolute legend of the game, though. So we're looking forward to seeing him again in his career against Ottawa. 20 wins, 10 losses, 2 overtime losses, but just a .900 save percentage and a 3.14 goals against average. So Ottawa's facing Marc-Andre Fleury, and what's his format right now? Is Marc-Andre Fleury? That's a lot of years he's been playing, man. You got to respect it. Marc-Andre Fleury has dropped his last 3 starts, 0-1-2 in his last 3 starts with an .850 save percentage. All that after shutting out Anaheim with a 16 save shutout. So he probably didn't even break a sweat in that game. As for Ottawa, I mean, you're looking at Joonas Korpisalo playing his best hockey with Ottawa. And we weren't sure when we spoke to you on the postcast, but he actually made that save.
Yeah, after watching it.
That save.
Yeah, after watching it again, you do get to see that, although it was Scheifele that shot it, right?
Yes.
He shoots it in the worst spot he could have shot it, but hey, Joonas Korpisalo still making that save there.
He certainly did, and we're looking for him to make some more saves tonight. Joonas Korpisalo is 6-1 in his last 7 starts. Imagine telling you that in December, that Joonas Korpisalo would finish the season on such a heater. He's 6-2-1 in March, all of March, with a .908 save percentage and a goal saved above expected.
Above?
Not below.
What?
Above expected of just over 2. So,
well,
he's rolling.
Ross, to add to the stats, last 4 games that he's played, all W's. You love to see that. And a .926 save percentage.
That's unreal. And the other game during the win streak was a shutout by Forsberg. All right, Pilsy. So now let's get to the locked on players to watch in tonight's game. But before we do that, of course, we have to take a look at how your Ottawa Senators will line up in this game. Spoiler, it's the exact same as they did against the Winnipeg Jets, because Thomas Chabot is not ready to return. Shane Pinto at center with Brady Tkachuk and Drake Batherson. Tim Stützle is between Mathieu Joseph and Claude Giroux. Ridley Gregg between Angus Crookshank and Dominic Kubalik. And the fourth line, red hot Boris Tkachuk at left wing with Mark Kastelic and Parker Kelly. On the back end, it's Jake Sanderson with Artem Zub. It's Jacob Chikrin with Jacob Bernard Docker. And Tyler Klevin is with Eric Branstrom. We've already discussed Joonas Korpisalo starts in goal. Pilsy, who will you be locked on to tonight?
Well, Ross, I'm going to do something a little unconventional here. I'm going to be locked on to 3 players. Boris Tkachuk.
Not 2 in the Twin Cities?
No, this is a triplets here.
Okay.
Boris Tkachuk, Mark Kastelic, and Parker Kelly. I mean, this fourth line has been so hot. The last 5 games, so the win streak, they each have 3 points. Tkachuk and Kelly with 2 goals, 1 assist, and Casti with 3 assists. Casti is a +4. Tkachuk is a +4, and Kelly is a +6 in that time.
+6 in his last 5 games?
Yep, he's been really good. And the thing is, the Minnesota Wild, they haven't had a lot of luck with the depth in their lineup. So I'm looking at these guys who are on a hot streak right now, going up against a lot of younger guys in the Minnesota Wild that don't usually play a lot of games for them, or at least haven't this season, including a former Ottawa Senator.
We'll get to it.
Yeah. So I'm really looking for this fourth line to bring that physicality, have that up-tempo style game that Jacques Martin has been liking. They've each averaged over 10 minutes of ice time in that span. So he's giving them a lot more opportunities here. So my locked on players, Tkachuk, Casti, and Kelly, the triple K line.
I love that. I'm going to go with the Twins because we are in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, Minneapolis, which, by the way, I'm going to tell you a couple things about Minneapolis. Start of the next segment. Wild. We're learning here in Minnesota. But I'm going to go with the 2 superstars on this team, the 2 guys who are going to be wearing their jerseys tonight. Tim Stützle, who only has 1 goal in this 5-game win streak, but man, give him 2 points for that assist on the game winner in the game against the Jets. The way he noticed that Alex Iafallo was not only without a stick, but had just blocked a shot, was hobbled, and then used that to take the extra space and find the lane. Love that from Timmy. Even though he's only got 1 goal, he does have 5 points during this 5-game point streak or win streak for Ottawa. So I'll be watching Timmy Superstar tonight, and I keep saying it, and eventually I'm going to will this into existence. Timmy has to hit 20 goals. He's at 18 right now. So why not just get both tonight? Just get both tonight.
Yeah, I'm down.
My other locked on player will be Brady Tkachuk because the captain has been leading this team by example for longer than the win streak, but over the course of the last 5 games, he has 4 multi-point games. Didn't need any against Chicago, but 8 points in 5 games, 2 goals, 6 assists, coming off the game winner. Got to see his grandpa after the game, grandma as well. So he's got to be rejuvenated. And not only, this is back to Timmy, but the 2 of these guys had a great moment on the bench in the game against Winnipeg. Yep. Timmy blocked a shot and came back to the bench, and Brady was just loving it and kind of helping him get through the pain. And that's the kind of leadership that I think, and the romance that kind of went away a little bit for a while, that we need back in the mixer. So I think Timmy, the extra day off between these 2 games is going to help him because he took a couple big hits in that game and blocked the shot, still was able to battle through and make a play at the end of the game. But to me, this is something that I think we're going to see the best of Timmy and Brady tonight. So I'm going to go with them. I know they're not on the same line, but they will be on the power play. They finished 1 for 5, but got the last one. Yep. Let's score on the first power play tonight. Let's start nice.
I'm down for that, Ross. So we're giving the citizens a lot of work here. You need to be locked on to 5 different players for tonight's game.
Yeah. I think they can handle it.
I think they can handle it. Absolutely.
They can handle it better than this internet. I hope it's coming in all right here as we are boots on the ground in St. Paul. Senators Wild up next. We'll take a look at the Minnesota Wild lines and this 2020 draft. We got to get into that and more. You're listening to Locked On Senators. It's your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Sleeper. Guys, unfortunately, the Ottawa Senators season is almost over. But regardless of where they are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on the Sleeper app, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, especially when it comes to hockey. You can also play daily fantasy NFL, MLB, NBA, college football on the Sleeper app. I love the Sleeper app because it's got that group chat. You can talk smack to your buddies, let them know you got a big week coming up, and time is money. So if you're running late, coming home from dinner or work, and the puck's about to drop, don't worry. You can get your picks made in under 1 minute. All you got to do is pick studs like Boris Tkachuk, Mark Kostelic, Parker Kelly, Tim Stützle, and Brady Tkachuk, and pick stats like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in any given game. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and a locational availability. Check it out today, guys. It's Sleeper.
Right, Pilsy, game day for the Ottawa Senators. We'll get to the Minnesota Lines. A lookout, player to watch, and this 2020 draft class. I mean, talk about a ton of talent. We knew going into that draft class it was going to be elite, but 7 of those players will be in tonight's lineup between the Wild and Ottawa Senators. A reminder to follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on YouTube as well. Does go a long way to help the show grow. If you like, comment, subscribe as well. Steal your partner's phone, do all that. It's all great stuff. It helps us do things like a 7.5-hour road trip yesterday. Pilsy, did the Ralph live up to your expectations?
I was hoping you're going to get there, Ross, because a number of players from that 2020 draft played at the Ralph. So You'll love to see that. And I mean, the hype for the Ralph,
this is where North Dakota plays,
is warranted. Like, that arena is absolutely incredible. Built in 2001.
It looks like it was built yesterday.
You would never know it. I mean, when you put $170 million into
USD,
into an arena, that's gonna last the test of time. But this place rivals a lot of NHL arenas, especially the training facilities, the gym, the recovery zones that this team has at their disposal is incredible. Like, it's simply incredible. There's no other way to do that. So if you're ever in Grand Forks, highly recommend doing the tour. It was very enlightening and a lot of cool stuff. I'm jealous of all the kids that get to go to that school. Ross, you and I were thinking of applying to do aviation course.
Yeah, we were. Of course we were. And next time you go there, we'll make sure it's a game day so you can hear Chelsea Dagger, all that. It's quite wild.
I don't love hearing Chelsea Dagger, same goal song as the Chicago Blackhawks.
Other than that, the 7.5-hour drive, I mean, we learned a lot about Minnesota just driving through it. A lot more rolling hills than I expected. We saw 5 hawks, 5 birds, and
fighting hawks.
You saw a bald eagle and didn't tell me.
No, I told you.
No, too late.
Well, when you're
You're
driving.
like, hey, did you see that bald eagle we just passed? Like, come on, I need to know this kind of thing.
Sorry, I did point out every single church we saw in St. Paul, so you got to see
so
those.
many churches. I had no idea Minnesota was like that.
Probably the biggest church, though.
Really cool architecture here.
Yeah, very cool. The biggest church, the XL Energy Center. So we're going to check that out.
Yes, we will tonight. But yeah, St. Paul is like very like European almost. Kind of reminds me of like old Montreal a bit, where it's like all
not a European city.
Old Montreal pretty much is.
Yeah, but it reminds me of European, like Montreal.
Vieux Montreal.
No, I get what you're saying. That's just a funny first reference.
Quebec City, would that be better? Or why don't I tell you?
Still not a European city. Name one European city.
How about 7? You want me to name 7?
Googling it.
You want me to name where the country is and what the city is too?
Sure.
Firenze, Italia, Geneva, Switzerland. We can do how about
Regina, Saskatchewan?
Dusseldorf in
nice.
Germany.
Dusseldorf,
there you
love
go.
that.
Or Viersen in Germany as well.
Also a great place.
Hometown of Tim Stützle. We'll go with Stockholm, Sweden. We'll go with Bratislava in Slovakia. We'll go with Prague. We'll go with, why don't we do something fun
Oslo,
for the last
Norway.
one? How about Malaga in Spain?
Okay.
There you go.
Good job.
Was that 7?
Yeah. And all of them very similar to St. Paul, Minnesota.
St. Paul, Minnesota. All right. Speaking of St. Paul, speaking of the Minnesota Wild, they love their hockey here, by the way. They've got multiple bars around here, and I know the rink is right here, but it's just like we are a hockey bar.
Yeah, the place where we're going to meet up for
State of hockey.
today's game, Tom Reed's. That's where we met with Dean Brown.
And they just got NHL Network on almost every TV. And then the women's basketball on another. We were dialed into that. Caitlin Clark is legit. But all the NHL Network was on there as well. So they're just bouncing around games. I wish we had NHL Network in Canada. It's kind of a sham that we don't.
Well, I don't know. We don't need to hear them debating whether Austin Matthews should be a Hall of Famer right now.
Already 26 years old. But speaking of Minnesota Wild, let's take a look first at their lines for tonight's game. How about that? Because, I mean, this is the team that Kirill Kaprizov runs. He is their superstar player, and he's a guy who everybody's going to be paying attention to when he's on the ice. He is playing at left wing on the top line, Joel Eriksson Ek at center, and Matt Boldy at right wing. Second line, Ottawa 67's alumni, Marco Rossi with Marcus Johansson and Mats Zuccarello. The third line, it's Marat Husnadinov at center between Adam Beckman and Frederick, don't call me Johnny Gaudreau. And the fourth line, hey, I remember him. It's Jake Lucchini.
Ross,
in between.
As Tim Stützle would say, good kid. Jake Lucchini, good kid.
Good kid. 5 years older than him. Amazing. Name 7 Italian cities where Jake Lucchini could be from.
Wyatt Bongiovanni.
Okay.
Michael Cacconi.
Mason Shaw at left wing and Vinny Lettieri at right wing. On defense, it's Jake Middleton, another former 67, lefty, with Brock Faber at right D. We've got Jonas Brodin with Zach Bogosian and John Merrill with Declan Chisholm. We already discussed Marc-Andre Fleury starting in goal. Who are you looking out for tonight?
Well, Ross, this feels a little cheap and it's the low-hanging fruit, but you got to do it. I'm going to be looking out for number 97, Kirill Kaprizov. I mean, this guy is an absolute legend, superstar here in Minnesota, leads the team in points, obviously, in 66 games, 37 goals, 45 assists, good for 82 points, plus 13. But Ross, where I want to focus here is I already mentioned how the Minnesota Wild haven't been getting a lot of depth scoring. So they're relying on Kaprizov to light it up, and they're relying on him to light it up on the power play especially. So in the entire league, Kirill Kaprizov is 8th in power play goals with 14. And then power play points, of his 82 total points, he has 35 of them on the power play. Just for reference point, Ross, the Ottawa Senators leader in power play points is Tim Stützle with 19 power play points and 1 power play goal.
Wow.
So Kirill Kaprizov has 14 power play goals. That's 5 points less than the leading point getter on the power play for the Ottawa Senators. Like, he's just so dominant on that power play. That first power play unit is so effective. They're one of the better teams in the league, so they're going to rely on that. So we got to see a disciplined game from the Ottawa Senators, because as we know, the Ottawa Senators penalty killing, not so great. So I think the key to victory here, Ross, is you got to find a way to contain Kaprizov just in general, but especially you cannot give them too many opportunities on the power play. They're going to burn you.
And their number 1 defenseman on the power play is my lookout player. It's Brock Faber, who went 45th overall in the 2020 draft, and he's got 41 points in his rookie season. Wasn't even drafted by Minnesota, was traded there in exchange for Kevin Fiala. Hometown kid, comes home, was the captain of the University of Minnesota, so he's seen the Ralph from a different lens. By the way, the opponent's dressing room at the Ralph is underneath the student section, and they make it so that they have to go across the ice and skate under the student section when they leave the ice. That's an unreal kind of little Easter egg of the Ralph. But Brock Faber
knew what he was doing with that one.
Brock Faber had to do that skate a couple times. The captain of Minnesota, huge rivalry there between the two. And now he's lighting it up in the National League. Leads this team in scoring by a defenseman, and it's not particularly close. Joonas Brodin is second with 23 points, almost double for Brock Faber, who's 21 years old. He is just going to keep getting better and better. But the key for him, and you mentioned the fourth line, hopefully they're not out there too much together, but whoever is out there has to be physical against him, because he's undersized, about 5'11", 6 feet tall. He's not going to be the biggest guy out there. So I know he plays with Jake Middleton, who is a big defenseman, but don't make it easy on the breakout for Brock Faber. And that kind of brings us in to the 2020 NHL draft conversation. Brock Faber was the last of the 7 players picked who will be in this game. 45th overall. One pick before was One pick before was Tyler Kleven, who's going to be making his 14th NHL appearance tonight. And again, Nodak, Minnesota rivalry. And some fans might be like, we passed on Brock Faber. Yeah, right shot defenseman. He looked really good. But Ottawa also needs guys who can move players in front of the net, get guys out. Yep. Huge opportunity in the remaining games for Tyler Kleven, and I'm going to be watching him closely tonight. So that's who went 44th overall. And we also have the 8th NHL game, and I can already hear citizens being like, oh, he's scoring his first NHL goal. Oh, no. Murat Husnadinov, who just came over from Russia, had 23 points in 60 games in the KHL this year, playing pro, comes over here. We're going to see him tonight, 8th game. And yeah, he's got 1 assist through his first handful of games in the NHL. The first rounders, we already talked about Marco Rossi, former 67. He's starting to feel himself finally. He unfortunately suffered from long COVID and missed a full season of his development, but now he's got 20 goals this year. He's almost putting up the Shane Pinto stat line from last year. He's got 20 goals, 17 assists in 70 games, or 73 games. He's played every game. So that's good to see for him. Definitely. We want him to have a solid career. He was 9th overall in that draft. And I mean, we have to talk about the big 3 for Ottawa. Why don't we, just for fun? Tim Stützle at number 3, Jake Sanderson at number 5, Ridley Gregg at 28.
Yep. It's crazy that both these teams, the 2020 draft was so impactful and will be such a big part of their futures.
Amazing. If you had to redraft just with those players, how high would Brock Faber go is really the only question.
I mean, he's sneaking into the first round.
Yeah, big time. Yeah. So I guess the other one, and maybe this is unfair because Rossi missed so much time, but if you're picking a player today, is it Ridley Gregg or Marco Rossi?
Well,
I think it's kind of a toss-up.
Yeah, and it depends what your needs are and what you're looking for. I think for the Ottawa Senators, I would stick with Ridley Gregg. He's more the style of player that they need in their lineup. But I would have no issue if Marco Rossi was someone's answer.
All right. Let us know in the comments as well. 7 players from one draft class. And the draft wasn't even 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And like Tim Stützle's closing in on 300 NHL games.
Yeah, it's crazy. Wow.
Stützle has more points than all the other 6 guys combined, by the way.
That makes sense.
I'm sure he has more goals, more everything. I mean, the other guys outside of Jake Sanderson are all in their rookie years.
Yeah.
Right? So even still, pretty impressive, though, that all 7 of these guys are in the same game tonight, 8 o'clock in Minnesota. We will have the postcast with our guy, Seth Tupal, after the game. If you are in Minnesota, you can either reach out on Twitter at Sens Central, LockedOn.Senators on Instagram. We will be at Tom Reed's at 5 o'clock? 4:30 Central. 4:30-ish. We'll be there. If you see us, say hi. Tom Reed's right by the rink. We'll walk over, get a little march going, and away we go to another boots on the ground game. We are 13-0-1 all time. And our first game was right after. We looked this up right after that 6-game win streak for Ottawa. So what better time to get one than right now? If they're going to win, Pilsy, like, look, Seattle won last night. So if the Sens win, they don't change their draft lottery odds by 0.5%. May I add?
Pittsburgh
won. Like, I'm cheering. I went from cheering for the teams below them to lose to now cheering for the teams ahead of them to win, because I want to keep winning but not affect the draft lottery spot. So that's what we got to do. So go Calgary in their next game.
You want to have your cake and eat it too.
I certainly do. Yeah. And maybe a few sodas tonight as well.
Yeah, a couple.
Pilsy, final thoughts on today's show.
Final thoughts for me. I wanna share the one Dean Brown story that we got at the end of the night, but I feel like that should be saved for another time.
Like a Friday episode.
Well, Ross, I was more thinking maybe next time the Ottawa Senators play Pittsburgh.
Oh, yes. They don't play them again this year, though. You're going to let the people wait all summer?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a tease.
Could be a summer story.
Summer story. So final thoughts for me is we're stoked to be in Minnesota. First time at the XL Energy Center.
First time in the state.
Yeah, well, I've been in the state just at the airport, so
that doesn't count.
No, it doesn't.
The airport is like, because if you pass customs in Ottawa, you're already like in the U.S. Like, you've gotten past customs.
Yeah, okay, fair. All right.
Airports are no man's land.
Yeah, true. Fair. Yeah. So this is my first time in Minnesota. Fired up for the game. That's my final thought. Fired up.
All right. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Thank you so much for listening. This has been another edition of LOSP. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. Thanks for listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.